I have to admit that I actually have absolutely nothing to say, which is that, but when I was listening to all of you guys reacting, and I was feeling excited, and I was feeling confused, and I was feeling quite sad, and I was feeling very inspired by that poem. But then I didn't know what to make of any of it, or how to assemble any of that into something meaningful to say back. Which is extremely similar to how I write, because I'm a very, very slow person. And I go through life collecting impressions and reacting very strongly within myself, but not really knowing what that reaction is. And then after a while, when I do write, it assembles itself in a very different way and in a very different time than the overwhelming time that Magda and Liz and Mark talked about in the technology and the news and the presentness that Nelly also mentioned. And I sort of want to insist on this, the capaciousness of imagination in relationship to our memory and in relationship to our formation of memory, which is, in some ways, it is always distorting it, but in other ways, it's a way of preserving it in a joyful way, in a very humane way, because it imprints it with imagination and it imprints it with humanity and more creativity, above all, which is very important to me. And the last thing I'll say is that there's something that I'm quite obsessed with for many years now, which is the idea of a memory palace. That before printing, people would remember things by imagining a palace and ordering information in different rooms. And to recall certain information, they'd walk through the palace, and in individual rooms, they'd place something memorable to remember. Let's say you're trying to remember the vices and virtues of Christianity. You would place something horrific or something very beautiful to match that vice or that virtue. But what happened then in the Gothic era is that when people began to make cathedrals, they excavated what they had memorized, and then they made these what we call Gothic images. Now, they weren't making those up, they were coming out of their minds. So what we see is their memory distorted, but what we also see is really imagination and how the human mind remembers things, which I think is very important. It doesn't only distort, but it makes beautiful, and it makes weird and creative.